No matter the era, no matter the conflict, Hutt space was a constant in the Star Wars universe, a whole swath of the galaxy completely given over to the criminal underworld. For tens of thousands of years, the corpulent Hutts and their servants ruled the region directly, maintaining it as an independent territory where the laws of neither the Republic nor the Empire were of any consequence. Such a vast region with such a long and unique history is bound to have more than its fair share of secrets, of course, which is exactly what we'll be looking at in this video. Hold on to your valuables and keep your blasters handy, because tonight we're going on a guided tour of Hutt space.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
In the distant pre-Republic era, the Hutts evolved on the planet Val. They weren't the only sentients on the planet, which they shared with the amphibious Rybits and the rhino-like Talanda Till, but they were the most powerful and most intelligent of Val's natives, as well as the strongest. 25,200 years before the Battle of Yavin and before the formation of the Republic, the Hutts used reverse-engineered Rakatan technology to establish an empire, conquering hundreds of nearby worlds. The Hutts, who in those days were warriors, enslaved or eradicated any species they found, and their wealth grew rapidly thanks to their conquests. But the Hutt Empire fell in 15,000 BBY, destroyed by a brutal civil war called the Hutt Cataclysms. Val was devastated in the war, and Hutt society was forced to restructure. In the wake of the cataclysms, the Hutts abandoned their warrior ways, adopting a philosophy they called Khajidik. Under Khajidik, the Hutts reformed their society into a network of criminal syndicates that constantly competed with each other for wealth and power. Their clans, which were also called Khajidiks, began building empires in the criminal underworld, which were united under the banner of the Hutt Cartel, led by the Hutt ruling council from Nal Hutta, the Hutts' new adopted homeworld. Instead of trying to conquer the galaxy by force, the Hutts set out to conquer the galaxy through the criminal underworld. The Hutt Cartel persisted in roughly the same form straight through to the modern era of the Star Wars galaxy, expanding its sphere of influence deep into Republic space. But even though the Hutts had ostensibly given up territorial conquest, they maintained a swath of space that they ruled directly, a relic of the Hutt Empire. In this region, called Hutt space, the Hutt Council's will was law. Ruled from the Yutub system, which contained the Hutt's swampy adopted home of Nal Hutta and its densely urbanized moon Nar Shaddaa, Hutt space contained thousands of inhabited worlds and many dirty little secrets. First things first, let's quickly establish the layouts of Hutt space. Nal Hutta and Nar Shaddaa were located in the southwest of the region near the border between the Midrim and the Outer Rim, which Hutt space straddled. Three major hyperspace routes led from it: the Utmian Pabol, a once legitimate trade route leading to the Republic, the Shag Pabol, which linked Hutt space's most prominent slave colonies, and the Pabol Hutta, which led through the most ancient parts of Hutt space. At the heart of Hutt space, along the Pabol Hutta, was the Bootana Hutta, while at the northern tip of Hutt space was the Periphery, a part of Hutt space that was seized by the Empire after the Clone Wars. Got it? Excellent. Now we can dive into things. The name Shag Pabol, which led from Nal Hutta out to Teth, means slave road, an accurate descriptor for this corridor of slave colonies. The planets of Shag Pabol were part of the industrial backbone of Hutt space, and nearly all of them were staffed by vast armies of slaves, from the part industrial, part agricultural colony of Ziugan to the slave markets of Rorak 5, the largest in Hutt space. But of all the worlds in Shag Pabol, Elesia was undoubtedly the cruelest. Elesia was Hutt space's biggest producer of spice, which was mined and refined in 8 colonies scattered across the jungle world. The conditions in these mines were terrible, and the slaves that worked them were treated no better than other Hutt slaves. But what makes Elesia particularly cruel was how it got its slaves. You see, most of the slaves on Elesia actually came voluntarily, well, to a degree. The Besadi Khajidik, which ruled Elesia, managed operations on the world with the help of the Talanda Till, who had mild persuasive powers. These Talanda Till used their powers to perform religious ceremonies called exaltations, which they used to instill addictive senses of pleasure in participants. Beings who got caught up in exaltations on other Hutt worlds were lured to Elysia, which was advertised as a religious retreat instead of a spice mine. Once there, they were put to work, told by the Talandatil priests that their suffering in the mines brought them closer to salvation and encouraged them to keep working with regular exaltation ceremonies. Elysia was a trap, one that very few of its victims ever escaped. Our next destination isn't far from the Corward end of the Shaddaa Bowl, the mysterious Circumtor system. Every single world in the system was blasted and desolate, ravaged by some forgotten cataclysm, except for Circumtor itself. Circumtor was an artificial ring world home to a reclusive clan called the Shell Hutts. The Shell Hutts weren't a true Khajidik, as they rejected Khajidik philosophy in favor of a modernized version of the old Hutt warrior codes. The Shell Hutts got their name from their impressive suits of armor, which featured inbuilt repulsor lifts and were incredibly durable. Though few in number and generally irrelevant, the Shell Hutts were the last remnants of the old Hutt Empire, terrifying opponents with immense strength and resilience. Aside from Circumtor, they had colonies on a scattering of worlds on the southern edge of Hutt space, among them Narkaga and Afavan. Meanwhile, on the complete opposite end of Hutt space was the Ciklata cluster, located close to Hutt space's northern fringe. Access to the densely populated Ciklata cluster was heavily restricted by the Hutts, and for quite a sinister reason. The homeworlds of 3 species were located on the Ciklata cluster: the Nikto, the Klatunians, and the Vodrins. The entirety of all 3 species was bound in a state of slavery to the Hutts by the Treaty of Vontor, named for a famed historical battlefield that was also located in the cluster. Access to the Ciklata cluster was restricted as a means of preserving Hutt control over the populations of Vodrin, Klatun, and Kintan. The fewer outsiders the peoples of those worlds met, the less exposure they would have to the idea of life free from Hutt servitude, and thus the less likely they were to rebel. Moving on, our next topic is a somewhat obscure region in eastern Hutt space known only as the Cairns. The Cairns were a rather ominous stretch of space, a place of dying stars and blasted worlds where few spaces travelled. The main hyperspace lane through the region was called the Dead Road, and just like with Shaddaa Bowl, the name of this route was pretty on the nose. Worlds in the Cairns included Usk, the now abandoned home of an extinct Hutt slave species whose name has been forgotten. Morulen, a blasted world whose people once dared to rebel against the Hutt Empire, and Sakar, an icy planet covered in strange ruins that not even the Hutts dared to loot. Perhaps the 2 most ominous worlds in the Cairns were Tisht and Imhana. Imhana was a barren wasteland of black sand, completely devoid of all other features and scoured by fierce winds, a spooky place believed to have been despoiled by the ancient Hutts. Tisht, on the other hand, was a complete mystery, as the Hutt Council forbade all ships from entering the system and censored all information pertaining to it. Whatever they were hiding there, they managed to keep the entire galaxy in the dark about. Close to the Cairns was Val, the original homeworld of the Hutts. It's unknown what occurred during the Hutt cataclysms that so utterly destroyed the system, but if the death of Val was indeed the result of civil war, then the weapons responsible must have been truly terrible. Once, Val had been a marshy world lit by twin suns, Ardos and Ivona, which the ancient Hutts worshipped as gods. After the Hutt cataclysms, however, Ardos became a white dwarf, while Ivona vanished completely. With the exception of Val, every astronomical object in the system was completely destroyed, blasted into scattered asteroids. Val itself became an airless rock, its crust charred and bereft of any evidence that there was once life there. By the modern era of the Star Wars universe, Val had been lifeless for 15,000 years. But the Hutts continued to guard it, forbidding all travel to the planet's surface. For the Hutts, Val continued to hold a degree of religious and cultural significance, as did Ardos, the once mighty star they had worshipped as a god. With that said, Hutts of the post-cataclysmic period no longer worshipped Ardos, or any other god for that matter. By surviving the destruction of Val, they believed they as a species had become the inheritors of Ardos and Ivona, divine beings in their own right. Lastly, we have the greatest and most jealously guarded secret in Hutt space, the Bootana Hutta, or Garden of the Hutts. Located along the Pabul Hutta, Bootana Hutta was a swath of space that contained the private territories of the Hutt clans. Bootana Hutta was a sort of neutral zone for Hutt Khajidics, a place where clan rivalries were suspended and all Hutts could come together to revel in their wealth and power. Like with Val and Tisht, access to the Bootana Hutta was forbidden to anyone that wasn't a Hutt or a specially chosen slave. Large fleets of Hutt warships, which were a rare sight pretty much anywhere else, patrolled the borders of Bootana Hutta, especially the Mulatan, Elgit and Gos Hutta systems, which were the primary access points for the region. Slaves sent to the Bootana Hutta were not allowed to leave, which meant that the region always remained a mystery to the outside galaxy. Most of the planets in the Bootana Hutta were the vaults and throne worlds of the various Hutt Khajidics, all of which laid claim to at least one planet in the Garden of the Hutts. These worlds were dotted with luxurious palaces and contained treasures beyond imagining, all guarded by Hutt warships. A few worlds in the Bootana Hutta served other purposes though. Nar Chuna was home to a great but highly exclusive market where Hutt crime lords bought and sold priceless artifacts and luxurious trinkets worth more than entire star systems. Bootana Shagplan was also a market world, just of a different variety, a slave market, where members of rare and unusual species were sold to serve on the Hutt throne worlds. Bootana Hutta contained a few darker secrets as well, however. One world in the region, Hulun, was once the home of a peaceful sentient race, but was claimed by the Hutts as a nature preserve. Hulun's entire native population was driven into exile or killed, and those Huluns that survived lived in desperate poverty. Many tried to sneak into Bootana Hutta to see their homeworld again, only for the Hutts to capture and torment them for their own amusement. Languna, meanwhile, was home to another sentient species, a once favored slave race of the Hutts that had rebelled and been punished savagely for it. Most of the Langunans were killed, and those that survived were stripped of all technology. Languna, like Hulun, was turned into a nature preserve, often visited by Hutts out on safari who hunted the Lagunans for sport. Hutt cruelty knew no bounds, but with Bootana Hutta, where the Hutts were accountable to no one but themselves, it reached unimaginable heights. Well, that was a bit of a dark one, wasn't it? This was by no means an exhaustive list of all the secrets and mysteries of Hutt space, so if you like this video and would like to see more Hutt related stuff in the future, let us know in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.